This episode was made possible by Complete Wellness Medical Centers. Not feeling well? Stop by and schedule an appointment with them. They can help you out. Welcome to another episode of Interesting by Design. This is Ed. I'm here today with Eric Monte. He is someone that's very interesting that I think we're really going to enjoy hearing about. He's a candidate running for school board. I don't want to take too much away from his story, so we're just going to get right into it. Thanks for coming on, Eric.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit about who is Eric Monte?
That can be a very long story, but I'll try to keep it very short, just for time's sake. But I'm a father of two, married to a wonderful woman here in Seminole County, Florida. We've lived here about 7 years. We moved from here in 2015 from New Jersey, but I was born and raised in New York City.
Okay.
That's the basics. My children are 9 and 11. And they're third graders and sixth graders in Seminole County Public Schools.
Nice. Which public schools do they go to?
My son he's a third grader. He's at Rainbow Elementary. I think it's Oviedo, might be Winter Springs. I think it's on the border there.
Yeah.
And Indian Trails. My daughter is a sixth grader currently, and she's at Indian Trails Middle, which is in Winter Springs as well.
Okay, that's great. So I'm gonna just get right into it. What inspired you to decide to go for the school board? What made you want to sort of switch gears in your life and say, gosh darn it, I need to do this?
Well, it's probably a long time coming, me deciding to do this. When I lived in New Jersey and we got married, we bought a house and we thought we were going to live there for the rest of our lives, to be honest with you. We thought we weren't going to leave New Jersey. That was the house we were going to grow old in, and got other plans for us. But I was growing very concerned with the New Jersey school system, which usually has very good schools, even though, but came with very high property taxes, by the way. But I noticed some things happening in the schools I wasn't really happy with. And I'm growing up in New York City, I grew up with a very liberal school system. I mean, which you would call today classically liberal.
Okay.
I went to school with all nationalities and religions and races, and
New York City's a melting pot for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely melting pot. And my teachers were they were all pretty normal people. It was regular everyday people, who taught their subjects. They taught them well, had a really decent education. Elementary school is a little bit in the middle, but I think middle is always a tough years for any school. It's you have the transition between being a small kid and becoming an adult. So it's a very hard time, but I spent 8 years there, and then I had the opportunity to go to an all-boys Catholic high school, which was really an amazing experience as well, and really opened me up a lot of ways as well. But the public school system was very happy with it, and I enjoyed my public school experience. And if I felt I had a better opportunity in the public school that I was slated for high school, I would have stayed. But I thought I had a really good opportunity with this other school. So be that as it may, I'm a pretty open-minded guy, and I like to be pragmatic and look at all sides and accept people from all points of view. But when I was in New Jersey, as I had children, and I started paying more attention to what was going on, and I wasn't liking what's happening in the New Jersey system. Besides the fact that it was getting very expensive from a property tax point of view, but it was also getting a very moving away from the more balanced, centered, neutral positions that I was used to. There's some teachers I thought who were maybe right of the aisle, and there's some left of the aisle, but they all were pretty balanced and kept their politics quiet.
Gotcha.
New Jersey, I saw this changing a lot drastically. One thing that I really felt I couldn't understand was there's a lot of things that happen in the news and that are important issues. But to me, that's something you do in your personal time. I very much believe that when you're at work, you're there for your employer. When you're at school, you're there for your school, and you're there to learn. And I saw it was New Jersey that these teachers were taking the kids out of school, out of their, even if it had to be a social studies class, something like that. I thought it was inappropriate leaving school just to show people what it's like to protest and go down to the local city hall and protest whatever the problem du jour was. And there was many of them, but that's fine.
So that wasn't like a field trip per se. It wasn't
no,
like, hey,
it was,
we're going to go to the museum.
It was some teacher just said, I'm going to do this. And they either had tacit approval from the administration. And I just thought like, hey, listen, you want to do this after school? You want to arrange something after school with parents and say, hey, can I take your kid? We want to do a, activist. Hey, I'm all for that. I believe in free speech. I believe in the ability to protest, the government. And I have no problem with any of that. I just feel like school time is for school. And I find the argument a little weak when they say, oh, well, these social issues are a very important part of school. Like, well, no, I kind of think that the important parts of school are math, science, English, or language in general, depending if even if it's not your first language, just these are the things that kids need, especially in the lower grades. And I think it was a distraction, and I was really uncomfortable with it because I was like, I don't know what the politics of the teachers are. I don't know what they want. I don't think that politics has anything to do with teaching my children a specific subject, which is what I entrust the public schools to do. So I was kind of relieved because there's some things that were happening in the schools as well that we were filtering down. Like there was a lot of sex education that was filtering down past what I felt was like the 6th grade level, even 5th grade level, down lower. And I felt like, why is this even a discussion for kindergartners and first graders? And that really. That was I found it very peculiar. The level of appropriateness of those discussions with people who quite frankly weren't their family or their parents or someone who can guide them or at least knows their child, because you know your child really well from the time they're little kids, and you kind of get to know their personality and things they like and don't like and things that make them upset. And I don't think no matter how good a teacher is and how connected they can with their students, they don't have the same connection that parents ought to have or should have or do have with their children. Gotcha. So I was pleased that when my wife got this fantastic job offer to come down here to Central Florida, that I was really pleased that I was right before my daughter was going to start kindergarten. So I was like, oh, good, I get to avoid all this and go someplace. And we wanted our kids in public schools. My wife is a product of public schools. She actually went to public school longer than I did. She went from kindergarten through college. She went to public university. So,
that's great.
We really both believed in public schools, and we wanted to make sure our kids had a real good public school education. We believed in the diversity of public schools. We believed in the breadth of the amount of people you met, and of all walks of life, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, culture, religion. We really thought that really made you a well-rounded person. So we want to make sure we found a good school system and made sure we brought it into a county that had that, and that was Seminole County. And we even got down to the point where we found out which schools we wanted our kids to go to and made sure we could buy a house in those areas. And some houses were really nice, but we said, no, it's not the schools we want. So we were very particular about the schools that the kids went to. And we have Rainbow Elementary is a fantastic elementary school. We've had nothing but positive things to say about it. And we've had 2 principals, and they've all been excellent. The teachers have been excellent. And the kids and students and the families and the PTA, they're all very well run. But I noticed like 3-4 years ago, and this gets into the original question, is that 3-4 years ago, I really started getting concerned because this happened in the wake of the Parkland shooting, a tragic event that happened down in Parkland, Florida. And of course it hit home because it is our state. But again, I started seeing the things I saw in New Jersey where kids were encouraged to leave school during classes. And I'm like, okay, that's not really what I think should be happening. And I'm all for, protesting, like I said, after school, on the weekends, your free time is your free time. But really also in some of the parents groups, I saw people sharing literature that was being distributed in the schools with certain symbols that will say that usually are not symbols that we would find conducive to what really America stands for. And in the sense that it was very anarchist symbols, communist symbols that relate to Marxism, and these ideologies. I found like, hey, this is disturbing to me because to me, Marxism and communism. I have a degree background in history as well as engineering. I got a double degreed, and I studied 20th century history very, very closely, and as a major part of my degree.
So why did you want to study history? Like, because I know you're a business man, successful in engineering. What attracted you to history? I like history as well. So just kind of curiosity.
I just loved it from the beginning, and even though I enjoyed ancient history, like the Roman civilization and the ancient civilizations that was interesting, but I really loved American history. I fell in love with the Revolution. I fell in love with the founding fathers. Just the creation of America. It really is something I bought into, and I loved reading about these men who I believe were divinely inspired. I know that's something that could be, that's a hard concept for some people who maybe not be very religious, and I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, but I think that it was a very unique time in history, and a very unique time that created this through the Enlightenment and philosophical and teachings at the time, created this amazing country that people from all over the world still want to risk everything to come to. And my family is, come from immigrants. My histories, we've only been in this country 120 years, which seems like a long time, but when I was born, that was only about 80 years, and that's one side of the family. The other side was less, actually. They came 25 years after the other side of the family.
So where did your family come from? Where did they migrate from?
My father's family immigrated from Italy, more specifically Sicily, in the late 19th century, like 1899, 1900. And my grandfather and my mother's family came from southern Germany, and they came. My grandfather was born in 1910. He probably grew up during, as a little boy during World War One. Probably experienced famine and all kinds of upheaval. And if you know anything about your history after World War One in Germany, because of the Treaty of Versailles, you had this horrible inflation, not quite as bad as we're having now, but no, let me rephrase that. What we have is not as bad as what the Germans had after World War One. They had horrible inflation, 10 times worse than probably what we're experiencing right now. And he became of age 18 years old, kind of like when this thing was going on in 1928. And so when he became an adult, him and one of his older brothers just said, "We're out of here, we're going to America." And they came to America on their own, and he met his wife in America, but she emigrated from Germany as well. So,
so you're not like a traditional Italian family, because I'm also Italian American too. Right. And there was a sort of a side of Italian Americans where we're like, we're going to marry other Italians, and like it's keep the bloodline flowing. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, I always joke about my my family, because my mother was German, and she grew up as a German speaking in the household. I mean, so you think about any other immigrant group that comes here speaking a different language and they come to the household. That's what she had, even though it's from Europe, but still she was considered an outsider and grew up in America. Even when she was born in the early 40s, she's not. My parents are not quite boomers. They're before in the baby boom. She grew up in the 50s when being German and having a German last name,
not really cool.
German speaking German was not cool.
No, it wasn't.
Not cool. And like, I was telling my mom, how come we don't speak German anymore? It's like, well, they didn't really talk about it much, but and there is some movies that reference this. There's a movie 20 years ago with Matt McConaughey called U-571, and there's a story about they had this one soldier on the submarine that spoke German, but he kept it very quiet, and like the OSS guys were going. OSS was the precursor to the CIA, and they're like saying, "Oh, you're sprechen die Deutsch," and he's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about."
So that brings me another question, Eric. Yeah. So did you marry a German woman, an Italian woman? Tell me about your wife.
Well, my wife's an amazing person, and I talk about mixed marriages. It's like, as I was going to say, my parents were a mixed marriage back in 1961 when they were married. Even in Italian culture, a Sicilian marrying what we call an albiodon, which is someone from
not really good.
Was considered mixed marriage as well. So you get down really hyper regionalistic about these things. So it's amazing how far we've come. And so my wife actually is an immigrant as well. She came here in 1980 as a 5-year-old from the country of Guyana, and most people don't know where Guyana is. It's
where is Guyana actually?
Guyana's in South America. It's next to Venezuela, and it's Venezuela. I think is to the west. Then you have Brazil to the south, but it's mostly rainforest. There's not much population there. It's most people on the coast. And then there's the other Guyanas, which is Suriname, which used to be Dutch Guyana, and French Guyana is next to that, which is actually still part of France. But she grew up in. She was It was Guyana when she was born, but her parents grew up in British Guyana. My father talks about the time being grew up in the British school system, where he was naturally left-handed, and like they didn't believe in left-handedness, and they made sure he knew how to write with his right hand because all the desks were that way, all that kind of stuff. And he remembers he got off for he got a piece of candy on the Queen's birthday. He remembers saying that. So they immigrated. They actually left because of a revolution. There was a revolution in Guyana. They got their independence, I think, in the 50s or 60s, and then in 20 years after the first government kind of fell apart, a revolution happened, and they left because it was just things were not good. So my wife grew up in a typical immigrant experience in Queens, New York, and she grew up. Her family lost everything. I mean, they were reasonably, for Guyana, middle class, and it was my father went to college as an engineer. He's a civil engineer, and but then when he left the country, when you come to America, your credentials and everything you've earned outside the country don't mean anything, and so he had to start in a warehouse and start from scratch again. And so they figured out, oh, you're pretty smart, and so he worked his way up and became a civil engineer again in the state of New York, Department of Transportation. He just retired like last year, but he made something of himself. But she grew up living in family houses and back rooms and basement apartments and one bedroom apartments and studios. And then she finally, when her father finally got back on his feet again, when she got to high school, she was able to move into a house. And in Queens, like a typical Queens house, like if any of you people older remember All in the Family, you see those rows of houses in Queens. That's kind of like the house she became a teenager in somewhat. So, but she was a really smart girl. She went to public high school, like I said, and she was valedictorian of her high school, and got a scholarship to go to medical school, and she's a physician today, and she's worked in urban areas, mostly in underserved areas. That's where her passion is. She really has passion for serving underserved communities, and she's an amazing person. She really is.
It's always wonderful when you find love. Like, one of the questions I love to ask people, and this is becoming a trend, how did you know she was the one?
Oh boy, this is a funny story. Well, I actually didn't, going to an all boys Catholic high school and going to an engineering college with mostly men. Dating opportunities were slim and scarce.
I understand.
And I was kind of like, I wasn't quite a jock, but I wasn't quite a nerd either. I kind of bordered the two, and I kind of played in both sectors, and you realize once you leave college, there was a dearth of options, or at least it was harder. And so I really didn't get a serious girlfriend until like my mid-20s. And I dated this other woman before I met my wife, and we thought about getting married. But there were some things that we just couldn't come to agreement on. And it was just difficult. It was just difficult. It's difficult, just like, it took more time to explain things and have understanding. And I think the biggest light bulb that happened to me was we're on our second date, and I think we had a very successful first date, and we went to I invited her over to my house to cook her dinner, and she, as I was cooking, she actually brought her. I was in a one-bedroom apartment in New Jersey somewhere, and she brought a chair from the dining room and sat in the kitchen so she can listen to me talk. And she had a long day at work that day, and so she wanted to sit down, and she was talking. And at that point, I had not mentioned, we had actually spoken for like a month or so on the phone before we actually met. We met through a dating service.
Okay.
We're an eHarmony success story. Let's put it that way. So we actually spoke on the phone. Spoke on over computer chat, and then we spoke on the phone, and we didn't meet until after talking to each other for maybe 6-8 weeks. So we got a lot of the preliminaries out of the way at that point. So by the second date, we were pretty cozy enough with each other where she felt comfortable sitting down and talking to me, and coming to my apartment, having dinner and that type of thing. And most women usually wait a few dates to to trust somebody to trust.
I mean, that's that big step,
right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make her dinner. I wanted to show her that I could cook. I'm the Italian in me, which is funny. My German side of me actually is more the cooks than my Italians, but I love Italian food. So we're sitting there, and of course, you never talk about the previous girlfriend. You never talk about your ex.
Yeah, of course.
But I didn't bring it up, and so somehow we got in a conversation of homes and stuff to that effect, and and my previous girlfriend was very wealthy. She had a family that had a lot of money. They had a foundation and all like that. So it was
Hmm.
nice, but they were content in that if we got married, that they'll just take care of us, which didn't really sit well with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to be kept in a certain way. I mean, even though we could say that now that I'm a stay-at-home father, that maybe I'm kept now, but the reality is I didn't feel like, I felt both of us we were in a partnership, like her parents controlled my income, and I just didn't like that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we had one of the arguments we had was that, oh, if we get married, the previous relationship, her parents would buy us a nice house. And this is back in the 90s, so they were buy us a $500,000 house, which was, at that time, a really nice house.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not comfortable with that, because then it's their house, not my house, not the one I earned. And my so when when I came to my wife, I said, well, I probably would have had a nice life if I stayed with my ex, at least comfortable life. And they said,
Hmm.
well, why you say
Hmm.
that? It's like, well, they had money, and if we got married, they would have bought us a house. And the first words out of her mouth were, well, why would you want that? It wouldn't be your house. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you. You get it. And that was like the first, like, wow, I don't have to explain myself to this person. She
Yeah.
understands me. She understands where I'm coming from immediately. And it's like, wow, that is so much, when you have someone that instantly gets you and
Hmm.
knows where you're coming from. And of course, we're married. We have our, typical married, issues here and there. But in general, we love each other still, and we're
Yeah, of
dedicated to
course,
each other.
of course.
But
Every marriage has the growth of conversations, and you kind of learn more and more about each other. I guess that brings up a question that I have in reference to um, when you had mentioned that you're a stay-at-home dad.
Mhm.
Um, what is that like to be a stay-at-home dad? I mean, I guess many people now, because of COVID-19, in the last 2 years, have had some experience being at stay-at-home. But what was the experience like for you?
Well, we joke, my wife and I, because she came from she's if you're not know about Guyanese culture, it's a Caribbean culture. There's a mixture of various different cultures, but mostly it's African background of people came,
Hmm.
because the British controlled it. So you had people coming from India as indentured servants, and you
Hmm.
had the slave trade back in that British colonial time before they banned slavery
Hmm.
in the British Empire. But so my wife is Indian ethnicity, but she's Guyanese, and if you talk to Indian people, they'll say, well, Guyanese is different from being from India, and if you get down to India, it's like Gujarati are different from Punjabis, and it's
Yeah, yeah. You get the class system over in India where,
well, there's the caste system, but it's also the regions too, just like Sicily, Nablus,
yep,
Milan,
yep.
Rome. They all have their own regionalistic cultures and languages and dialects and so on and so forth. But and
Hmm.
food, and so what was the question you asked me? You asked me about
What's it like being
stay-at-home father, right?
yeah, yeah.
So we joke that being she was raised as a typical Indian woman
Hmm.
that which with and there was not necessarily my mom was pretty progressive for her time. She said nope, because there was a strong in the Italian culture back in the 50s. It was like, oh, that's women's work, that's men's work. Women do that.
Hmm.
My mom said nope, none of that. My son's going to learn how to cook. He's going to learn how to do laundry. He's going to learn how to clean. It's like he's not, my daughter's going to go to college if they want to. All those things, as a second wave feminist probably would want. And so so I learned, I did things that most boys probably didn't get. I used to go to my friend's house who get these Italian mothers that would serve, like, we come and watch TV, and like the mother come down with these trays of apples and peanut butter and snacks. I'm like, this is nice.
What is this?
My mother's very German practical. Like, the food's in the fridge, you know where it is. So we were trained for two different roles, and it
Hmm.
just the way our lives worked out. I mean, she has this fantastic career. She's very talented at what she does. She's really passionate about it, and she spent a lot of time and money educating herself to be this wonderful clinician that she is, and
Hmm.
teacher. And so when it came time, like when our kids got old enough, we moved down here. The industry I was in there's not a lot of this industry down here in Florida. The cost of living here was so much less than New Jersey. I mean, the property taxes alone was
Mm-hmm.
amazing. No state income tax, freed us
Yep.
up a little bit. And it would be nice if I could keep my job, but things were changing in the marketplace, and they really could keep me more than like a year and a half, and this wasn't working out anymore. So I decided that I should stay home, and we're blessed that we can forego an income to take care of our kids. I know most families don't have that luxury. They really don't.
No, they don't.
And, because I know I grew up in a 2-income household, so I understand that this is a blessing we have, even though it's going to hurt us probably in long-term stuff, but we don't care. We felt it was important.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenges are just, you know, the culture, no matter how much we've come in female empowerment and women choosing all the things, all the opportunity they have. I mean, even women are a higher percentage of college graduates now than men. The reality is that the society is still set up as a women-based thing, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's very hard to break into that, because when I hang with the dads, they're kind of like, "What are you doing? You're doing laundry?" And they think that's strange, And like, well, my wife handles that. And like, well, I never say that to my wife. We kind of share duties,
Yeah, division of labor, as my wife likes to call it. We have division of labor. I'm like, okay.
Division of labor, and of course, there's
Yes.
some things I do better. I mean, most of the projects in the house that involve getting on ladders, and some
Mm-hmm.
that's my job, and when
Yeah.
it comes to other, but I can cook and she can cook, and it depends on who feels like doing it that day. And
Mm-hmm.
cleaning, I've cleaned houses, she does it, so we do things pretty equally, and
Yeah, you try to split the roles. I guess that brings up a question for me.
mhm.
You had mentioned earlier that you had a mom that was kind of like almost a feminist before feminism term was cool. What was it like growing up? And it sounded like it shaped you in a unique way. I'm just kind of curious if you could share a little bit about that with me.
Well, my mother was she grew up, like I said, in an immigrant household. She was an only child, but not because of, like, today a lot of people have only children by choice, because, as she likes telling young people today, back when I was a mom, there was no birth control. You got married,
It's
you
true.
got married, and you did things in the bedroom, and you made babies.
Yeah, it was like a que sera method. Be like, here we go.
Right. She had 3 babies,
Mm-hmm.
2 pregnancies. She had twins, and then I think she had a miscarriage in between. So she had 3 pregnancies in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and she was really overwhelmed with it. And it's like, so the choice, but she was an only child because her mother passed away when she was 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so she basically grew up with her father, and like I said, he immigrated over with his mother. I'm sorry, with his brother, and he had a wife, and they had no children. So she grew up in this very adult household with not many siblings. But if you know anything about the German culture and German education system, they sort all their kids by 4th grade. They
Really?
have they have them like in 3 different schools. They have gymnasium, which sounds like gymnasium, but it means that's the upper schools for people who are going to like be lawyers, doctors, high end educators, professors, stuff like that. Then you have the laborers. So they filter, okay, you're good with your hands, and like, okay, you're gonna be an electrician, a carpenter,
Mm-hmm.
a baker, a pastry chef, which are 2 different disciplines in Germany, because there's bread bakers and there's dessert makers.
Cake burgers. Yeah.
Yeah. So and they break, and painters, whatever the trade may be, and then they have the service people who are retrained to be waiters and hotel clerks and retail employees and service based stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving a very broad brush. I'm sure there's more intricate.
No. Yeah, that's really, really helpful to sort of paint a picture.
So her father was very much, he's an old fashioned German. Women at the time, in early 20th century, nurse, teacher, secretary, then you become a mother, and you take care of kids. That was kind of like the thing. So my mother really wanted to go to college. She was smart enough to go to college, and then she was probably born maybe 10 years later. She probably could have had the opportunity to.
Mm-hmm.
But this was late 1950 when she graduated high school, and just like, there wasn't many opportunities unless you were really rich or really, really, really smart.
Yeah.
And so I think she begged her father to send her to a 2-year college, at the time called junior colleges. I think she had a 2-year junior college degree, but she was really a sharp lady. But she was determined. She really believed that she had the opportunity of not the rigidity of the culture at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that had a lot to do with things that you probably wouldn't think about, like just like birth control wasn't around, so like you couldn't have a career
Mm-hmm.
because you never had children. But if you take medicine that could prevent you from having children, then decide on children when you felt like, have a real family planning,
Mm-hmm.
you can have a career or you can have education, because you
Yeah.
didn't have to,
Yeah.
because what happens is, you didn't have to push off you can push off marriage, you can push off children, you can push off a lot of things and do all these things where previous generation women didn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
You had to be a
Yeah.
really extraordinary woman or a very forceful woman to get the things that you wanted or have money, where you could, have the luxury of doing whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So she was not, I wouldn't call her a typical like Gloria Steinem feminist. If you asked her about Gloria Steinem, she'd say like, "Oh, I don't like Gloria Steinem," but she did have a copy of Our Bodies Ourselves, and old feminists will know what I'm talking about on her bookshelf. So she was not your typical what you call bra. She never burned her bra or anything crazy like that.
Okay.
My mother was not that radical, but she was very radical in the sense of her ideas towards division of labor, towards female empowerment and making sure her
Mm-hmm.
daughters got opportunity. Broke out of the rigid mold because she felt that since she had no one fighting for her, and not that her females in her life didn't love her grandmother and her aunts like that, but still, it's not your mother. And she
Yeah.
felt that
Yeah.
if her mother was alive, she probably could have fought a little harder for her. So she made sure she fought hard for her daughters. Because I have 3 older sisters. I'm the youngest. So she fought really hard to make sure they had the choice of education and not just be roped into just being a housewife, and which is a fine choice on its own. I mean, and I think that for some women that's what they want, and that's great. That's what they want. Choice of women's deciding what they want with their lives, I think, is very important. So it's a really strange background, especially when it wasn't the typical what you see in the movies or you see glorified, because it's kind of, she was not as, she, like I said, she wasn't like a bra burner or anything like that. I always joke because my father's younger brother married someone similar, but they
Mm-hmm.
have different politics, so it's like they have the same ideas but different politics. And I joke that the 2 sides of the same coin,
Gotcha.
same
Gotcha.
mindset, same strength of woman's strength, but different views of how to go about doing it. So
I guess that brings up another question. You grew up with 3 sisters, all older. Do you feel, based upon that, you have a more of an understanding and affinity to how women talk and act? And I grew up in a household as well where I had 2 grandmothers, mother, a sister. I only had my dad, and I had a few other relatives that were also women. So I always kind of look at it being like I have a different perspective because I've had so many women impact my life. Did you feel the same way? Did you have that same feeling, or how was it for you?
Yeah, I absolutely. My sisters were not shy. They would definitely spoke their mind. My favorite story is telling my sister when, I'm a little kid, I'm like 6, and back in 1970, whatever that was, when I was
Hmm.
that age, you didn't see a lot of female bus drivers. Most of the bus drivers were men.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
remember one day at the dinner table, all 6 was around the table, and that day I saw actually a female bus driver. I thought that was cool and interesting, and I was just saying it out loud, and I said like, "Hey, I saw today." Like, as 6, 7-year-old kids do. Like, I saw a female bus driver, and I remember one of my sisters turned to me. I won't say which one. Said, "You male chauvinist pig."
Wow.
And I was like, what? What's a chauvinist? What are you talking about? I just know I upset my sister. And so, so I probably had a much larger affinity, and I love my sisters. They're really great people. And,
Hmm.
and and I still talk to them regularly. Actually, they're slowly moving down to Florida.
Oh,
One's moving
nice.
down here in a month. The other one's planning on moving on next year. The other one might be down maybe South Florida. That'll be or do snowbird stuff. But
Hmm.
the reality is that no, it really. I didn't grow up with a lot of men. My father was always working, and he
Hmm.
was. I mean, my father is an amazing guy. He's an inventor, brilliant scientist. I mean, one of the great material scientists in the world. He just got into I know most people don't think this exists, but there's something called the Plastics Hall of Fame, and he just got inducted into it in the past month, and it's really quite an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
He has worldwide patents. He has 32 U.S. patents, and
Wow.
done a lot of amazing stuff. So my father was constantly working. He really took this seriously. Like, you work, you provide for the family, and all that kind of stuff. So he really did that. So I didn't have, and I was much younger than my sister. So I was my middle sisters, because they're twins, were 6 years older than me. So I kind of grew up as like a weird only child, because by the time I
Hmm.
got to like middle school, high school, they're like, "Oh, I'm the annoying little brother," and so, but I didn't have a lot of men, and I had, yeah, friends in the neighborhood and stuff. But my father was always working, and my family's aunts and uncles have had spread out, and and so I do have a strong affinity towards women and their plight, because I've seen the struggles my sisters went through, my mother. And I have a much different perspective, I think, than most men. But I also, on the flip side of that, I also craved male time,
Hmm.
and a lot of my cousins who were close to my age, who were male, had moved away, far away, so I didn't see them as often. So when I got to I did Boy Scouts, I did
Yep.
Cub Scouts, and I want, even though I kind of delayed my rushing a fraternity until after I got my feet settled in engineering school, but I enjoyed the fraternity, and I really enjoyed that, because I kind of craved male um company. But I kind of enjoy talking to women a lot, because I find women. That's what I grew up around. So I actually am very easy talking to women, and not in the player way, more in just the, oh, how
Yeah, the friend zone, the friend
yeah, yeah,
zone.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very good in the friend zone.
I guess that brings up a question for me, Eric,
Yeah,
because
yeah, sure.
you had mentioned that you got involved in a lot of organizations after and in school. What are you doing now? Because do you have a sympathetic heart to individuals like yourself that are kids coming up? Or how are you volunteering now? What are you doing in the community now?
Well, I've always felt strongly about mentoring. I mean, young men, because I
Hmm.
think, and I mean that in the most wholesome way, and in the sense that, even when I was in my fraternity, I stayed on as an alumni advisor and president of the alumni association, and I wanted to help the boys navigate college
Hmm.
life,
Yeah, yeah.
and all that stuff, and I took that seriously, because I know that even men having a good mentor, father figure, someone, even though if they had a good dad, sometimes they need someone else to talk to, because maybe their dad
Hmm.
doesn't always understand, or their dad has certain plans for them that may not be the plans they want for themselves. So
Yeah.
I felt very strong that men don't have those voices, and boys especially don't have those voices talking to them. So when I told you I had this great opportunity going to the Catholic school,
Hmm.
when I and it gave me a greater understanding of religion, and the philosophy of religion and
Hmm.
spirituality. But I didn't, the normal, the courses were kind of in junior and senior year were geared more, like the first 2 years were mostly Bible based stuff, like Old Testament, New Testament. But the later stuff was more like, death and marriage. And I thought it was like, okay, yeah, back in the 60s and 70s when kids got married, out of high school, that's made sense. But I don't see myself getting married very anytime soon. So I don't
Hmm.
say taking a marriage course at 17 is going to help me. But they offered a special course in called where they taught you, they trained you to become a teacher of catechism.
Hmm.
I was a Catholic, so we went to a Catholic church. So you had to actually become trained as a catechist, at least in the Archdiocese of New York. And I
Hmm.
was trained as a catechist my junior year, and then senior year I actually taught in one of the local parishes, for the younger kids.
Hmm.
And that lay dormant for a while. So fast forward to today, and like I said, I became a stay-at-home parent, and that's great to getting the kids to school, arranging their activities, doing the food shopping, all that stuff that has to be done. And that really also made me understand doing the food shopping and stuff, because I think most women said is that they really have, I always laugh at the commercials that say, oh, they always gear towards housewives, doing the shopping. And I'm like, well, I do most of the shopping. Not that my wife never shops, but I do most of it. I'm very keen eye on prices. I watch
Yeah.
the price like a hawk. Like every time I get my bill at the end of the thing, I look at the receipt, and I know what I bought and what the price said on the thing, and I check it before I leave the store to make sure they charge me the right appropriate amount or give me the proper discount or whatever they were advertising. And luckily, I have a brain that I could do that. But so I'm really in tune to what the socioeconomic problems that we're having today, because I see it. I know what the price of milk is. I know what the price of eggs are. I know what the
Yep.
price
Yep.
of bread is. Because I do it weekly. And so when I started doing that, I said, well, I need something else. Like I get my brain working again. And so I was in church one weekend, and they said, hey, we really need catechists. And I'm like, oh, I did get trained in this, and maybe I should go do it. So I volunteered to be a catechist, and I teach Sunday school, pretty much. And I teach the older kids. In Catholicism, we have something called a sacrament called confirmation. I know each Christian religion does it differently. But I find that most major religions, be it Muslim, Hindu, Judaism, have a ceremony for young people moving into adulthood, and this is kind of what our version of it is. And it's really you become an adult in the church and that kind of thing, and that's kind of like the general idea.
Gotcha.
There's more to it. There's more to that, but I'm trying to keep it.
Yeah. There's so many layers to like religion. So
and then a lot of the stuff got created. I started doing that. So that's why I volunteered in the community. I also recently I decided to they really had a problem with substitute teaching, and and they really needed teachers, and that's what kind of keyed me into what's going on in the schools. And that in the last year especially, there's been a brain drain. I know at least a handful of teachers that left, and these are good teachers, these are quality teachers, and they left to get better jobs because we know teaching is underpaid. We know teaching is
it's a calling. It's not really a career.
It's a calling.
I mean, you're almost like a priest in a way. Like you're doing it for the community.
That, and
I don't know if that's the best example, but that's how I kind of.
We make trade-offs. It used to be in the old days, like you worked in the private sector, you made more money, but you also worked all the time. You only got 2 weeks vacation. Where if you worked in civil service, either being a teacher or working for the government, you didn't get paid great, but the benefits were good, and you had other fringe stuff like teachers. You get your summers off. Most teachers get the summers off, which I know my sister works in the school system up north, and she loves getting her summers off. She's like, that's fantastic. That's worth every penny in the world. Where she get 2 months to basically shut down her brain and relax,
chill out.
Yeah. And so I mean, so in lieu of high pay, you get these other benefits that and granted that's the discussion for another day of like the pay of teachers, and I think. But
that's a very long discussion.
Wages in general in this country have not kept pace with
inflation is at like 9.8% this past month, and like I know for a fact most employers across the board are not giving a 9.8% increase to match living wage. But that's for another day.
That's another topic. We go in the weeds on that forever.
I mean, like
in the business world, employee salaries is something very important to me. And also as an employee itself, I was an employee as well too. It's like, it still amazed me that what was a good salary when I graduated school 27 years ago. What is considered a good salary now would be considered minimum wage job now. It's just. The quantitative easing, whatever you want to call it, that's the fancy way of saying our money is worth less.
And there's a lot of factors surrounding that, but we're not going to get into that because that's not what the pop.
No, but this does. I will interrupt you on this. This stuff does something very important.
No, it is super important.
That that's why it's important in the schools here, and this does something that the reason why I'm running is that I know that there's people out there who have done better than their parents. They stayed in school, they kept out of drugs, they kept out of trouble, they did the right things, and they're marginally doing better than their parents. Or like on paper, it's like, wow, I'm making 4 or 5 times than my parents ever did, yet I feel we're struggling or we haven't moved up as high as I thought I would making this much money. And there's a lot of people who have done well, who have 2-income households, who are professionals when their parents may have been laborers or service people or so on and so forth. And they're going, I can't afford the stuff, and if this public schools fails people, or they start failing the people, most people who have the ability to either homeschool or buy out to go to private school do. But the people who can't are stuck with the public schools. And I don't mean stuck in a negative way. It just means like that's their only option. And I know there's a lot of people out there who feel like, hey, I've done many times better than my parents ever can dream of I'm doing, but yet I still can't afford to send my kid to a private school if I find that the public schools are not doing their job. So it's imperative, I think, that we keep pace with what the world expects of our young people to make sure that when they graduate school, that they have the skills and the discipline necessary to be successful, so they don't have to rely on not just their parents or relatives, but also the government. They can make their own way in this world, and in a way which way they feel satisfied with their lives, with their outcomes. And the public education system is the best way to do that for the most people, and I really believe that, and that's why is one of the impetuses why I'm running, because I really have seen especially in the last year, a degradation of discipline. And I know the schools are trying to work on that, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things, the issues that are coming up that I think that are academically. I still don't understand why we don't have spelling bees in our middle school. I mean, I had a spelling bee in my middle school. I mean, like, they're not focusing on grammar and stuff that I just like. These are important things. Knowing how to write, knowing how to express yourself is so important. Knowing how to critically think, is so important. I know a lot. We've kind of moved at the college level, but the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that has to drop down to the secondary school level, to the K through 12 level, because not everyone has the luxury of going to college. We found that so many people get caught in the spiral of debt, that you don't get what you pay for when you go to some colleges, especially if you don't choose the right degree.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of colleges are good at taking your money and saying, "Oh yeah, you can sign up for this course. That's great. You can take this degree," but they're not really good at making sure that you actually get a job that pays back the debt that you've incurred. And that's why I really believe in financial literacy. So these kids come out, they know when they sign that FAFSA form and they're taking out that student loan, they know, okay, what is the average salary I expect? What else is needed? Do I need a grad degree after this? How much is that? What other training do I need to actually get this job? Because you get in the high specialized fields, it's not just a degree you need. You
Mm-hmm.
need other credentials that you have to pursue, and you might delay your income for several years. You don't realize that. Like, oh, I thought I was gonna make the big bucks when I graduated college at 23. Like, oh no, I'm not gonna make the big bucks. I'm 28. It's like, and that's
Yeah, well,
five
it's
years.
kind of like the game of life where you could just get started in your career path, or you can go through the educational route. And the educational route sets you back multiple turns before you really get going for a payday.
Well,
But when you look at
well,
the cards for a career path for with the college education versus otherwise, it's significantly different in the game of life.
mhm.
So, are you more or less, I guess, in more simplistic terms, trying to um, get people to consider that through the role that you're getting into, or are you looking more or less to say, um, you don't have to have a college education to be successful. Like, you can make a good amount of income, a good career, if you just go the route of trade school.
Well,
Um,
I think graduating high school is a bare minimum to success in this country. You have to
mhm,
graduate high school, and I don't mean social promotion, like really graduate high school. But I think the not going to college thing could be a double-edged sword, because whenever you hear all the great success stories, like so and so went college, and and went and started his own business and do this, and then you
mhm,
really dig deep into their stories, like, oh, they were upper middle class or were rich already, and they had, their daddy had money, and like, and it's like,
mhm.
okay, well, it's easy to take risks, and leave college when you actually have a backstop to make sure, well, worst comes to worst, I can always go back to college because I have enough money to do that. And if I risk, this capital or this situation, to get that.
Mhm.
But most people who are living paycheck to paycheck, or they get a scholarship to a high-end university, this is their only shot, and they're not going to take risks. They go, nope, I'm going to stay on the path. I'm going to get my degree in whatever this is, because this will lead to a good job, and
Mhm.
that will pay the bills, and lead to middle class life in America, and that's what I need. So I can't just leave this and go off with my friend I met who might have some money and go, oh, we're going to start this business. Well, that's great. If it fails, what do I do?
Yeah, like, how do I pay the bills? How do I put the food on
Right.
the
So
table?
so so
Yeah.
so I'm not here discouraging college. I think college is a necessary thing for many, many situations. And I think,
Hmm.
just in a classical sense, if you take the right courses, it can really open your mind. And if you really are very smart at picking which courses you are, it can really make you a better thinker and philosopher, and make you understand life a little better. However, that being said, but there's a lot of people that it's not meant for them, or just the risk or the financial, their skill sets or their aptitudes is not strong enough to risk the money it takes to get to that degree. You might be better off just starting at 17, 18, when you finish high school, and hitting the pavement, and work and build something, either in service or trade, or, like I
Hmm.
said, the German models, like, learn a skill. I mean, we need, all these skilled positions that, you could earn on, you can learn, and we need that. And even if you don't end up becoming that trade person, let's say, no, no, guess what? I'm just going to go to night school and I'll get my degree. It'll take me 5, 6 years, but I'm going to do it methodically and
Yeah,
cheaply.
yeah.
Those things can translate to your own life when you have your own house. I mean, everyone knows when you own a house, oh, I got to fix my roof, I got to fix my gutter, I got to fix my AC system. And if you have build these trades, like, hey, this is no big deal to me. I learned basic electrician stuff. I know how to
I could do this
the circuit.
blindfolded, running backwards.
Right, exactly, and that just saves you money in the long run. So even if,
Yeah.
we all had to take. I mean, I remember even my middle school. I took glass making, I took woodworking, I took ceramics, I took all kinds of practical courses that used your hands, and because it taught you a skill, and and that's the one thing that the arts gives you too as well, is it forces your brain to think. One of the best courses I took in high school was I took a music appreciation course. We had this really great teacher who
Mm-hmm.
just loved like classical music, and he taught you about the history of classical music and how they made the music and where and why, and it was like it just really opened your mind, and you teach you all different types of, and it made you also made you a very cultured person. So if you ever do run with a certain set of people, you don't feel like you're like, oh, they're talking this crazy stuff I've never heard of
Yeah,
before.
they're like the Goodwill Hunting moment where they're kind of talking over your head. I
Yeah,
guess that brings up a question for me. Like we really dove into a lot of different areas, but one of the
oh yeah.
areas that I find to be important that is kind of I don't know if it's underserved or not underserved. I'm not thankfully in that situation. What about the kids with special needs, with autism, with uh, the extra help? How do you envision trying to support them in your bid to become a candidate for school board?
Well, the I have a nephew
Hmm.
who is on the autistic spectrum, so I've seen his struggles. He's a smart kid, good kid, and he's capable. He drives, he's an adult now. He drives, he takes, and I have a cousin who's similar. He has
Hmm.
some learning disability, but he works for Publix. He's drives, he's married. He productive life. These are,
Hmm.
and they're wonderful people. So I have people I love very dearly who struggle with these things that in the old days were just treated like differently. And I think what we suffer from here, especially in Seminole County, is that, and I've heard the stories of people who have to do the IEPs and who have these issues, that our services are severely backward in the sense that we're not providing the services that I think a modern family expects to get from their public school system, that they're traveling to Orange County to get them, or they're
Oh
doing
wow.
homeschooling. And yeah, and I think it's a lot of times it has to do with that. Who I haven't dove deep enough to find out what the issue is, but I suspect it might be that the people who are running this part of the school system have the problem you get is in someone, when they graduated, let's say college in the 80s or the 70s or whatever, they were trained in the 70s and 80s methodologies of learning, which were probably mostly fine, but we've gotten so much data in the last 30 years about psychological testing and
Hmm. Hmm.
intelligence and these spectrum issues like autism and obsessive compulsive disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, all these things, and that we really have these very hyper specialized plans that've been tested and true. And unless these people who were trained decades ago are really up to snuff on these things, they don't know. And a lot of times they're in a high job and they don't want to admit that they don't know something, and the
Hmm.
school system
Hmm.
does not provide training like, hey, if you want to keep this job, you have to train yourself in these new methodologies and you got to get on board with it. But a lot of times that's a hard conversation to have. The hardest thing to do, no, I know this in business, the hardest thing to do is get people to change their methodology, to train them into new ideas. It's one of the most difficult things in any paradigm, but business especially. So I think what we have here, this is my suspicion, not I don't have the evidence or proof, I'm not calling anyone out. I just think that maybe there's a lot of people there who are working there who have been there so long, they just don't know, and they're just holding on to dear life to their retirement, and they're not really engaging, and they're just deflecting. And the people
Hmm.
who are, and now you have a bunch of parents who have maybe been trained themselves in these new methodologies, who know, or who have just self-taught themselves, just because the internet has provided so much opportunity to learn, that they know more than some of the people who have the high level staff positions there. And it's just detente that they can't get past. And I'm not trying to besmirch any of the people in the upper administration or in the school board, but they probably haven't had the courage or the impetus to actually go break it, because it might cause unpleasantness, and no one likes unpleasantness. But sometimes, if you're really failing that badly,
Hmm.
if sweeping under the rug is causing the rug to get all lumpy and smelly, and it's unpleasant for everyone, at some point you just got to pick up the rug and just deal with it. And one thing I really want to do is that the fact that we can have a $1.1 billion budget, and we cannot provide the special needs services to our non-traditional students, the
Hmm.
learning students, is to me is just a complete failure. and and it's sad that we are the 60th biggest school district in the country, and we cannot provide these services to a satisfaction of what the current paradigms are, and tested paradigms of engaging all these non-traditional learning methods to make these students feel, and parents feel, like they're cared for, they're getting what they need. And I know it's expensive, and I know it's highly specialized, but the reality is it needs to be done, because that is the reality of today's world. If not, they'll go other places, and we don't have the luxury anymore to be cavalier about, oh well, they can just go somewhere else. That's not, I don't think that's a real winning strategy. So it's something which I really feel that has to be taken head on, and something that I would tackle head on if I was duly elected by the people of Seminole County.
Gotcha. That's a really interesting answer. I didn't know what direction to go with it, and it sounds like you're very much an advocate for
interesting good or interesting bad.
No, interesting good. I I don't know how you're going to answer the question, so I was kind of taken aback and impressed.
Well, thank you. I try to be true to myself, and I try to really, I've really thought about these things. I'm not. This is not. This is a school board is there used to be a popular idea about school board that it's a dead end job. No one wants to do it. It's made for housewives or rich people's spouses or something like that. Maybe some educator who doesn't want to teach anymore can run for the school board type of thing. That's kind of how it's been. But I think it's changed dramatically in the last few years, especially. And it's considered a part. You might not realize, but it's considered a part-time job. It's not a full-time job. We get paid, but we get paid less than the lowest paid teacher. So, which as it should be. I'm not, I think that's fine. So if you're running for school board and you're doing it, and especially in my situation where I don't have any other income, my wife does okay. But it'd be nice my wife says, well, it'd be nice if you're working, I'm like, yes, I agree. The kids are still too young, but she really believes in my mission here into making the schools better, and to really stop a lot of the things that I'm seeing wrong with it. And I'm one of the few candidates, especially in the candidates in my district that I'm running against. I'm the only one that really could dedicate this full time to the job, because besides my family, obviously, and I'm a substitute teacher and I teach Sunday school here and there, but the reality is this is my job.
So you're not treating this candidacy, if you do get elected, as a side hustle?
No, it's not a side hustle to me. It's really going to be something where I'm going to really feel going to make my mark. The one thing, I have had a successful business career, but you ever feel like you're like, I'm really destined to do much more, and I really believe I can do much more, and I can really help people. And this opportunity came my way, and that's one of the big reasons I ran. Because I thought about this for months, like, should I run? Should I run? This is going to be a hard thing. I'm not a politician. I'm not. I've never run for office before, ever, and can I do this? And the first thing I did was I sat my family down and I said, okay, this is going to be a tough road. You're going to, I talked to my kids. I said, kids, your father may become known, and maybe not in a good way to some people. And you gotta be prepared for that. Are you okay with this? If you guys tell me, no, I don't want to do it because you matter to me, and you're how you, and they were all very supportive. And my kids are wonderful, and they're always there to support me. My wife, especially, she puts up a lot of this stuff. But the reality is that I really thought about this. And I said, is this really what I'm meant for? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I thought about it, I prayed on it. And one thing that came back to me was, I happen to be living in a district that's up for re-election. It's the opportunity that's here now. If I want to do this later, I was under the impression that the person that currently holds the seat was not going to run again. So you're not running against an incumbent, and always running against incumbents, it's always hard. So I'm like, it's going to be an open seat. And it's like, when am I going to have the opportunity to run in an open seat for this position again? And
because once you're elected once, everyone knows your name. They're like, oh, there is have them go again,
right? You have a track record and all that stuff.
Yeah, but I think now, like, the state of Florida has come up with like term limits. Is that correct?
True, that is true. Starting in July, I believe that, and so it affects this upcoming election. Like, let's say when I win,
good attitude to have. Good attitude to have. Yeah.
I can only have this job for 12 years.
Okay, so you have to retire after 12 years.
You have to retire after 12 years, and the reality is, yes, I could say I'm doing this for my kids, but I'm really doing that just for my own kids. Even though they're young and for at least 2 of my terms, I will have my children in the school system.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'll have my own personal vested interest, but I wouldn't do this for such a low pay, for such, such hard work. I mean, dealing with not just, you got to deal with teachers and administrators and parents and the kids, and some parents, some interactions are wonderful and they really uplift you. Some are hard and challenging, and they ask you tough questions, and they have high expectations, and you do it because you really feel it's a public service, and you're doing it that, if God bless me with my talents, my brain, the opportunity to learn a lot of things and have many degrees, and blessed with parents who are able to help me with that, and good fortune in a lot of ways. So to me, this is just the right thing to do, is to give it back as best I can. And because I really believe I have something to offer, and it's something which I have the luxury of actually spending the majority of my time on it outside of family, responsibilities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a unique time and a unique position. And that's what made me say, okay, I'm going to do this. It's an opportunity which is not going to come along. And I really believe in that, where when God presents you an opportunity, you got to recognize it and know to take it. And I take it on. I take it on seriously, and with an open heart and an open mind, and really out to serve everyone in the county as best to my ability.
So, like, I know, like, in our current day and age, there's a lot of people, when you use the word everyone, and like, well, everyone but me, or everyone but this, or everyone, or I like, are you literally saying everyone, or are you saying like, everyone but?
No, there's no but. I mean, but the reality of life is that you're not going to make everyone happy. I mean, you're gonna make some people upset, because you're going to do things that may not suit everybody, and because there's no way you could possibly know every single family's needs, and you may meet them, you may overexceed them, or they may be not noticed. So I'm not in the delusion that I'm going to be universally loved. Okay, I'm not doing this to be universally loved. I'm doing it to be effective. I'm doing it to make it as best for the most amount of people, and that includes mostly, since I understand that I've been blessed in my life, that I really feel that, knowing my immigrant background, knowing that my father grew up poor, my wife grew up poor, it's like, I really feel for the people who don't have the socioeconomic opportunities that other people may have, that they really need the public schools to be functional, give them the skills they need. And this dovetails into something I really find very important, is that, the discipline issues we're having in the schools recently, and that could be because of COVID, that could be because of various reasons, but and a lot of it starts in the home. I mean, if a kid goes back to a broken home with that toxic people in it, there's only so much schools can do, and we can only do our best to find the services that the child needs, or the family needs, to make it better. But I find that, when we have these very loose discipline standards, or these discipline standards that are not applied uniformly, no matter what good intentions you may have of going, oh, we don't want to put, to punish that kid, because he comes from a tough background or a tough family life. But the reality is, you're not doing the kid any favors. You got to tell them that to be accepted in this society, there are rules you have to follow, and there's discipline you have to enact upon yourselves. And if you break rules, there's consequences to those rules. Now, we can take into effect all those other outside factors and use that as but to dismiss any discipline outright because, they come from a poor background, or they come from a challenged background. That's that. I don't think that's doing any favors for the kid. I think you only can mold something if you apply pressure, and conversely, and additionally, what I mean is that the kids in the classroom who suffer under some of these kids who are disruptive or are not doing things, they're suffering because they may be in the same situation they're in too, with bad home life, or poor socioeconomic background, but they're trying and they're being distracted. And how is that fair to them? It's not fair to them. It's narcissistic, and it's self-serving, and sometimes we have, if that's not being provided to their adult mentors in their own lives, and that is the school's responsibility. It's one of the few things I feel the school has a responsibility to do, is that we need to provide them structure, okay, and uniform, consistent structure. and not blind structure where, it's just rules just because of the sake of having rules, but, take into account, the exceptions, but not make the exception the rule. So I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. That's interesting perspective on it. There's, there's like, no, it really is like, because you're jumping into a role I have no desire to ever even touch. Like you're like the more and more I get older, I'm like, heck no, I'm not ever wanting to run for public office. That's crazy. You have to be out of your mind to want to do it, because instantaneously you're just seen as untrustworthy, and you're seen as all these negative traits, and like I just, the more I look at it, the less I have any interest in my life to be a public official. So I give you a lot of kudos because you're trying to affect change, and you're doing it knowing that you may not come out on the other side unscathed.
It's one of my biggest challenges, because I like to feel I have integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate to contradict myself ever. And, but if I get new information that makes me change my mind, of course I'm open to it. But I know I'm going to disappoint people.
Mm-hmm.
I could say, oh, I could, like any politician, I can promise the world, but then when I get into the deep down heart of it, maybe it's something bigger than I bit off more than I could chew, or maybe it's going to take a lot longer than I expected, or it's going to cause way too much strife that is going to, cause an unintended consequence that's going to be worse than the actual solution. So, it's, there's a lot of this trade-offs. People have to think in trade-offs. Like, you may have the perfect solution, and then in application, you don't realize, oh, well, that happened, or that happened. Well, I didn't see that coming, or I did see that coming, but I didn't think it would be worse than I thought it'd be. And so I already know that I'm going to feel like I'm a failure every day, because I know that I disappointed somebody. I didn't, do enough, and I'm going to have to say, like, no, you're doing the best you can. Your heart's in the right place. You're not out to get anybody. You're not here to you rather be able to be persuasive enough to people to understand that your intentions are really good. And I think a lot of people's intentions are really good out there too. I'm not doubting that at all. But I think once you, I think the hardest thing to do for anything, even not even being a politician, just being a human, is that you have good intentions. You want to help people. You want to do things a certain way. And not everyone has good intentions, but in general. But the reality is, when you don't meet those outcomes you expect, that a lot of times people just either double down, or they just ignore it and they go, well, hopefully it'll go away. And they don't go say, hey, I messed up here, or this didn't turn out the way I hoped, and I should have listened to this person, or some of that effect. And I like to think I'm humble enough to know that when I mess up, or I'm hoping not to, listen, I think I'm confident enough that I won't mess up too badly. But I also been kicked around enough in life to know that I'm not perfect.
Yeah, no one's perfect. Anyone that thinks they're perfect, the only perfect person that one of my friends says that whoever's ever here, we nail to a cross. So like that. With that being said, no one's perfect. No one's perfect.
Yeah.
So
and the teachers' positions, they're they work with sometimes so little, and there's some challenges in the school system with infrastructure and facilities and equipment and IT services and a whole bunch of other stuff that. Yeah, that's a whole other topic we can delve into, is IT stuff, but that for many years. But the reality is that the teachers really do try as best they can, and a lot of the consternation out there is there's a lot of misunderstanding or misconceptions, and that goes on all sides of the political spectrum. I'm not picking out any one people.
No. It's just
I really pray that hopefully, I'm hoping. I mean, this is a big ask. I'm hoping that I can institute some grace back into people's lives, and that the people here care, and and that and to reinvigorate the idea that, hey, without the school system wouldn't exist without the parents, the taxpayers. That's because they're the ones who provide the students. That creates the entity which enables the school system to exist, but then provide the jobs to the administrators, the teachers, the staff people, the bus drivers, janitors, the cafeteria, everyone down the line. And they're all important, okay? And they all have their say in what they have to do. But I think sometimes organizations get myopic in their view, and they think like, well, we're the experts, and and like, yeah, and you may be an expert in that field, but you don't realize that each parent thinks they're an expert in their child. And they don't
Yeah.
expect a
Yeah.
tailored education. I don't think anyone really expects that. I mean, except for maybe these non-traditional special needs situations. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that most kids, most parents just want their kids to be treated fairly, treated
Mm-hmm.
honestly, and leave the topics that are meant for the parents to the parents.
Okay.
As one person told me recently, very strongly, they said that it's up to me to teach my culture and my beliefs to my child, not the school.
Mm-hmm.
And now, granted, there's a certain beliefs that maybe we can find less benevolent than others, but the reality is, in general, if we assume that most people have good intentions, that most of the stuff that they teach them about is going to be benevolent. And yeah, not everyone knows everything, and we fall into this trap of like, oh, I'm an expert, so I know all, and it's like, well, sometimes giving people all the information doesn't always lead to good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes you have to let people grow into the information and experience it on their own. It's like telling a kid, don't do that, and then and they go, yeah, and then until they actually experience, like, oh well, maybe I should listen to they have to actually live it to a certain extent. So it's a balance, and I think we do our best to provide a good education in a controlled, disciplined environment where we have quality educators teaching well accepted subjects that are relevant to the formation of the child and student's mind and their
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
abilities to be successful in this world, to be able to navigate and be a good citizen, not just to themselves, but to the county, to the state, and to the country. Because it's a big world out there, and if people think that we're only competing with ourselves, when that's not true. We're competing with the world over lots and lots of things, and that's another discussion. But it's something
Okay.
which I think that we have lost sight of, and I firmly don't believe in lowering the bar. I rather raise the bar up here and have people fail and understand that failure to make them improve, to get them over that hump, than to lower it and say, oh, look, all people would pass, isn't that great? Like, well, yeah, well, anyone could do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really pushing the kids to realize their own potential and realize they can do things and they can change their, they can they can believe that they can change it. And yes, there's always this luck that plays into it. There's other things that are out of the control. But if
Mm-hmm.
you sell kids the idea that they are failures or they're not going to amount to anything, that's what they'll become. If you sell them the idea that they are capable of controlling and have advocacy and agency of their own lives, and if we can provide that in the school system with the education they need to be successful in that life, we will have a fantastic, or at least a better outcomes than we're having now, I think. So, I'm not going to be able to guarantee the world here, but I can at least, set the tone
Mm-hmm.
differently and really and it's important to me because it's something I've studied, like you said, a double degree in engineering but also in history. And one of the things when my thesis was on, like, America's competitiveness, how can we improve that? And it
Mm-hmm.
really starts with K through 12 education. It really, really does. All the societies in the world, you go to Korea 80 years ago, war-torn country, ripped this, and the amount of advancement they've had is because they really have a strong culture. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to do it in homogeneous societies. Americans have a challenge because we're mixing different ethnic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, on and on and on and on. And so we're trying to unite behind the ideal, and that the ideal of America, of a place of liberty, a place of freedom, a place of opportunity, which I still believe exists.
Mm-hmm.
And if we tell our kids that it's not, what are we doing? Then we're going into a tribal situation where people will just fight each other over their little petty minor differences, instead of uniting behind this wonderful, wonderful ideal of liberty and freedom and opportunity and the ability to be, you're not tied to your old class or your old caste or your old socioeconomic status, that you can make something of yourself. You can also fail like
Mm-hmm.
anybody else, but you're not held back by some structure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Where
You're actually,
you'll just will never move beyond it because of the fact you were born in a family of X, so you're gonna
right.
be X.
And people who say, like, there's structural issues here in America, and there are. I'm not saying America's a perfect place, but the reality is that there are countries still today that have structural inequities in place, and you're born into it and you never can get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even in European cultures too, not just Asian cultures or African cultures or South American cultures or wherever the world may be. But in this country, it's really amazing how much. And that even though you may not necessarily be a Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, but hey, but I got a nicer house than my family ever had growing up, and and may not be a palace, but you know what? It's mine. And I made it.
do you think one of the things about democracy that works so well is it's like the idealism of America. Every generation, we kind of try to push ourselves to be better and do things better and improve things in a better way, and not get stuck in a rut. Would that be a fair assessment, in your opinion?
It gets really difficult. I think the technology changes that have happened in the last 50 years have been so amazing, and that has trickled down. I mean, I just read something recently that in the last 40 years, like in the whatever the number that the United Nations pegged as the number for abject poverty, 40% of the world lived under that line. Now today it's 8%. So even though you might go, well, there's still rich people and economic inequality and social inequality and all those things, but the reality is even the poorest people today are living way better than their grandparents ever could imagine. Now, I mean, I'm serious. I mean, if you still have grandparents who lived at the time of the turn of the last century and, lived in the early part of the 20th century, you ask them, did you have running water? Do you have electricity? Do you have a toilet in your house? And most people say, probably not.
No. For sure. Like, I know my grandmother stocked up on stuff after the Great Depression, even up to her death, where she just had a lot of stuff because she knew we need to have that. And I could, make sure we don't go without if things go sideways again.
It's one thing I'll say about my German side of the family, they really grew up during wartime, and if you know anything about the European wars, especially World War I, World War II, got absolutely decimated. I mean, I've been to Germany where it's like, you ever go to Nuremberg, which is where the Nuremberg trials are, but it has this old, the Altstadt, which is an old city. It has a walled city with a moat and all the buildings are inside of it. It's really beautiful. But the Germans who live there will say, yeah, that's all rebuilt. That's not the old city. Look at the bottom of the wall. You can see the original brick that was there that got, when the Allies carpet bombed the entire area and flattened it. Okay, and they said you could see it past the city into the hills. That's how much they flattened. Let's say Nuremberg. I remember the story being there. And if you look at the city walls of Nuremberg, you can see the bottom part of the wall is a different color brick, different type of stone, different color stone than the stone that's on top. So they rebuilt it all. So it's so being that my family's German, we my mother would tell stories of her aunts like scraping up the butter, whatever was left out of the thing, and putting it in packages and sending it off to Germany because they had nothing. They really had nothing. And my grandfather, who grew up in I used to remark that my grandfather and his brother would eat as soon as the food got put on the table, they would eat it so fast because I think they would experience that they didn't eat, someone would take it, or it wasn't there, or they wouldn't get a meal. And they grew up during World War I, where they probably didn't have they probably went hungry, and then they grew up in that horrible inflation. And then when they came to America, a year later, we had the Great Depression. So my mother, especially, she would store stuff. I mean, she was trained by these people to store everything and save everything, because you never know when you're going to need it, because you might not have the money, or it might not be available. And I think we're slowly realizing this now. It's like, with
the semiconductors, I mean, that was a real wake up call. Like, we were getting semiconductors, no problem. And then when there was a semiconductor shortage, which no one really mentioned too much about, that really affected us greatly in reference to vehicle selection, all the way down to like computers and different different things that were going on during the COVID-19. Like it's still kind of affecting us even now. It's not just really talked about at all. So yeah, I could relate to that first-handedly for sure. Well, with that being said, I try to limit these to about an hour. And
are we there?
I feel like we're getting close to an hour, maybe a little over, maybe a little bit less. But this has been a really good conversation, Eric. And I truly believe that we could have gone for another 2 hours.
I'm sure. I would make sure I brought a bottle of water with me to wet my whistle a bit. And this is my first time. I've done one or two of these things before, but mostly in like a group chat session.
Yeah.
I know this is going to be published like a podcast type situation.
Yep. Yep.
And this is probably my first podcast ever. So I apologize to anyone if my eyes are going, I'm trying to change my face, go on that camera right there and not do this. And I tend to talk like I'm talking like in person because I'm really trying to, like, we're having a conversation. So I think that I'm probably not as disciplined as like, okay, look at the camera and do this.
Well, in some ways, I think a little bit. So I look down a lot when I'm thinking, because I'm taking in what someone is saying. I think even though we're online, it's still like a true conversation, because in a true conversation, like, you can't have eye contact 100% of the time. And like, if you're hearing something and you're trying to take that into consideration, like, okay, what am I going to, what are my thoughts on that? What is he expressing? How am I digesting that? And like, what question is relevant for the future that comes into play for my side of it. So, but as a career politician, hopefully in the future, and like you have like that.
We'll see.
You'll have that need to be much more polished than I'll ever be. So thank you so much, Eric, for coming on the show today. And thank you so much for everything that you are wanting to do for the community. I hear the passion in your heart, and hopefully that transports into other people saying, we're going to give him a shot. Let's vote for him this upcoming election cycle. I wish you the best. And I want to have you come back on again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because there's more questions I'd like to ask, but I want to keep it within an hour.
Yep.
So,
and can I do one last plug?
Yes, of course.
If I may.
Of course, yeah.
If anyone is not familiar with how Seminole County School Board elections work, it's a countywide election. There's 3 seats up for grabs, districts 1, 2, and 5. If you're registered to vote in Seminole County, you can vote. It doesn't matter what party you are. The first election is the August 23rd primary. Mm-hmm. And even if you're a non-party affiliate, because they say, you have to be a party affiliate to vote. And that's true for the partisan races. School board is nonpartisan. So if you're an NPA, you can vote on August 23rd, and you'll have the school board races on your ballot. So make sure that there'll be early voting and vote by mail and all that standard stuff. But it's like, if there's the way to win the school board election is August 23rd, you have to get 50% of the vote. So if there's 2 people in the race, one of them will get 50%. But if it's more than 2, you need to get, if not, the top 2 go to a runoff in the November general election. So just keep that in mind. That's how it works here in Seminole County. And it's countywide. It's not by district. So if you don't live in my district, that's fine, as long as you live in Seminole County. And my website is Eric Monte for schoolboard.com. It's FOR, Eric. ERIC is back there, MON, the site yet, MONTE, for schoolboard.com. You can find me on Facebook, Eric Monte for School Board. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Please feel free to go to my website. If you've been inspired, I'd love to get volunteers. I need door knockers, and I would love to get. It costs money to run a countywide election. So if anyone's willing to even as low as $10, the max is $1,000 per person. So even if you give $5-10, it would be great. I mean, $5 will pay for a sign in your yard. So it matters. So no matter what I get, it will be really useful and helpful, and I appreciate everyone's time and listening. And just to mention about facial tics, when you're listening to some things, I think I was like, am I rolling my eyes when I do this? Because I'm looking up into my brain, like, and thinking, and I'm like, so I thought that was kind of fun though. But this is a great time, Ed. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
and thank you for your time and your expertise, and we'll hopefully do it again real soon. But
all right,
thank you so much.
All right, everyone that's tuned in and listen, thank you for coming out. Be safe. Till next time. Enjoy all our episodes. Have a great day. This episode was made possible by Complete Wellness Medical Centers. Not feeling well? Stop by and schedule an appointment with them. They can help you out. This episode was made and produced by i4 Web Services. Visit i4webservices.com to learn more.